face battles most never fought, pain, struggle, adversity. But here, we use that as fuel. This is the Battle Harder podcast, where we motivate, educate, and inspire warriors of life, veterans, survivors, leaders. We share stories and strategies to turn pain into progress. Here's your host, Coach Rob. Let's lock in and battle harder.
What is up, guys? It's your host, Coach Rob, here at the Battle Harder podcast, where I hope to motivate, educate, and inspire you to become the best version of yourself. Today's episode is going to be a great conversation as we have a woman here that had to live in survival mode for a very long time. We're going to talk about it, talk about her pain into purpose and everything she is currently doing now as a coach herself. I love having other coaches on the show to give their perspectives, especially from the female side of the house. So I'd like to welcome to the show Amanda Bearce. Thank you for joining me here on the Battle Harder podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Rob.
No worries. Before we get started, as I like to say, into the meat and the good stuff of the episode, so to speak, give us a little background about who you are and what you currently do.
Yeah, so I am a national board certified health and wellness coach. I help women who are overwhelmed, exhausted, tired of doing all of the things to slow down, to tune in, and to learn how to truly take care of themselves so that they can thrive both personally and professionally.
That's awesome. And we need more coaches, I think, in society. I don't think there's enough coaches. I mean, there is a lot of coaches out there, but I think we could always do with more and come from different perspectives or our different backgrounds to heal whoever it is in our community that we're working with. And for you to get to a coach, it didn't always begin this way. Let's go a little bit into your childhood and kind of the beginning of the struggle you had, and we'll talk more into that and how you got out of that and what you're doing now. So,
Yeah, sure. So when my struggle started, I was really young. At the age of, before I was 2, my mom and I moved in with my grandma because my dad was just unpredictable and kind of going through something, and my mom didn't know what to do or how to help him. And she went through a lot of things to try to help him. It did not work. So we moved in with my grandma, and then things just progressively got worse and worse and worse through my entire childhood. So he ended up having some pretty serious mental health issues, also struggling with addiction, which a lot of the times we know go hand in hand. He experienced homelessness for most of my childhood. I would say probably like 5 or 6 until when I was, an adult. Then he moved back in with his parents. He stalked my mom and I for most of that time. So I think I was probably about 16, maybe 17, and he had court-ordered time in a mental institution, and that's when things shifted. But that entire time up between when we moved out until he had that court-ordered time, it was crazy to put it pretty simple.
So what kind of things, if you don't mind sharing, did your mom do to try to help your father? And at the time, do you think in this time during society, because I know for me, my dad has severe mental health issues, but he was never taught to deal with them, and he just kind of go through the motions. And it seems like that time of that age group, it was just not necessarily unknown, but I guess you didn't really ask for help, even more so than today, and you didn't, come to terms with your trauma or whatever you went through. So if you'd like to expand on that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think now it might be very different for him. Had he had resources more readily available, had mental health things be more talked about. On the flip side of that, he was also a very proud person. And, so those things may have never changed for him. Also came from a Hispanic background where, again, those things are really not talked about. So I think there was a lot of things that were stacked against him. But my mom, she just tried supporting him. She tried having him stop drinking. She tried sending him to another city to finish college there and just doing, all that she knew how to do. And when I look back, it's like, I can't imagine how overwhelmed that she felt trying to raise me and keep me safe, but then also trying to help him until she just couldn't anymore and realized that it was never going to get better. And even leaving the relationship, it was still not great. But I think that had he been in the home, things would have been worse. And he would have been there, not just stalking from outside the home.
And that's pretty surreal and crazy, because on one hand you have your mom who probably loved your dad and
Mhm.
wanted to help him and was hoping, and praying that he would get better so maybe you guys could have a relationship. And then on the other end, the stalking up till 16, like in your teenage years, how did that shape you as a person, and like how did you deal with that? Because I'm assuming as a woman, girls need their dads. Was it hard
Mhm.
wanting to have a relationship with your father? Like how did that look?
It was very hard. I have one really great picture of the 2 of us. I was a little baby, probably less than 6 months old, and
Mm,
knowing, even as a 16-year-old, knowing that's not who my dad was anymore, because he looked healthy, he looked great, and knowing that that wasn't him anymore, I still kind of had hopes that one day that might be it, that one day he might be there, or just kind of, I wanted to have a dad so bad, and I wanted him to be healthy. He passed away about 6 years ago, and I was
mm,
not expecting. I didn't know what to expect, but I kind of figured, he caused me a lot of trauma. We never had a great relationship. I wouldn't have expected it to impact me, and I will tell you, it wrecked me. And I think it was, on an intellectual level, I knew we were never going to have that relationship. But then once he passed away, it was just done. There's no chance. It's just done. That's the end. But going back to, you asked how I dealt with it. I think as a teenager, I didn't.
mm.
I didn't believe at the time that it impacted me. "Oh, I don't have daddy issues." That was a lie. I was wrong. It took until I had my daughter to realize that I had a lot going on that I was not addressing, and I was really very reactive, and I always say, "Thankfully, I'm alive." I would go from fine to in your face screaming at you at the
Oh
flip of a
wow.
switch.
Mm.
Thankfully, and I live in a town where now there's a lot of gun violence. I'm like, if that had been now, I would probably not be here. So it was not good. That was a long time, and it's taken a lot of work to change that.
And I like what you said, because one of the things for me with the emotional regulation and control
Mhm.
is actually the fact that in a world where you can have guns, as a former veteran police officer, I have guns.
Mhm.
I haven't carried out in town in a long time, but in Florida we have the law where you don't have to have a concealed carry permit to carry. You can carry as long as it's
Mhm.
concealed. And at the time, as a person who was angry and miserable and yelling and screaming at everybody, like that's a real scary place to get in someone's
Mhm.
face and not know what they're going through and what they're dealing with, and if they're going to end your life on a whim
Yep.
or a minute. So that anger and stuff is not worth it. What have you seen, or what do you know as far as the difference in mental health between different race communities? Because I know for like the black population, black men take their lives a lot more in an alarming rate over white men, and I assume for Hispanic males having that do as I say attitude and that macho ness and nothing
Yep.
can hurt me attitude. What do you know, or what have you seen in those communities?
I just there's a lot of pride and not wanting to admit when things are going wrong or that you need
Mm,
help. That's the biggest thing I've seen, and I wasn't really close to that side of my family because of the circumstances. They were kind of dealing with the same thing from him, but so it was a very tricky relationship, but I really get the sense that they didn't wanna admit that there was anything wrong, which is so incredible to me because looking at how could there not be? There was clearly something very wrong, and I do think that when he did have the court-ordered time in a mental institution, I do think that there was a difference there because once he got back out, it was never the same. He still would call from time to time, but it was not an all day, every day sort of situation. He wasn't showing up anymore. It was just very different once he got out of the mental institution. So I think even though it was forced, it did do some sort of good from what I could see from my perspective.
so at any point in your life, at least with phone calls, was there any communication with your father? Did you get to have like any form of a relationship with him at all?
A little bit. So we at first had some supervised visitation,
Hmm.
and it was okay at first. Or actually I had unsupervised a little bit too. Though the core memories that I have from that, I now looking back can see that I was afraid. I wanted to be there
Oh,
and I
wow.
wanted to be with him, but I remember being afraid. Like I have a very clear memory that he bought me a pack of gum and he was telling me, "Oh, I got a pack of gum. It's in the car." And then when we got in the car, he couldn't find it and he started getting upset. And I could see that it had fallen like into that black hole between the center
Mhm.
console and the seat, but I was too afraid to tell him that. Or, he made me lunch and it was something I didn't want to eat that I didn't like, but I was afraid to tell him that I didn't like that. So I just kind of forced myself to eat it. That was when I was probably maybe 5 or so. After that, it stopped. They were supervised. I remember things like realizing this is probably when he first started experiencing homelessness and realizing that he didn't have money. So I remember asking my mom, "Well, can I take him the money that I have in my piggy bank and putting
Oh,
it into an
wow.
envelope to give to him?" Uh, as I got older, that stopped. He couldn't handle it. We had phone call times that were set up. He would call all day, every day. I could not answer unless if it was our designated time. And then sometimes he would call, sometimes he wouldn't. Sometimes he'd be nice, sometimes he would be awful. And then I think when I was probably 12 or 13, we had a visit like in a courthouse type setting where we were being observed by, I don't know, somebody
Wow.
determining if he was fit, and they decided he could not have contact anymore.
Wow, that's amazing. That's very scary situation. Like, I don't think
Mhm.
anybody would want to be scared of any parent, regardless of
Yeah.
the situation. If you know, or and if you don't mind sharing, do you know like what he had or what he was diagnosed with or what happened to him to make him act this way?
I don't know for I'm not positive what his diagnosis was. I am pretty sure it was bipolar and paranoid personality disorder,
Ooh,
which is n not a good combination. He was
no.
extremely paranoid. Half the time when I would talk to him, he would be about to die for some reason. The
Oh, wow.
KKK was after him. He had AIDS. He had, um, I don't know, like every time there was a different situation. So he was telling me he was going to die. And there was always a letter. He was always, I'm sending you a letter and it's going to explain what's happening because I can't tell you over the phone because they're
Oh,
listening.
wow.
So I would always run and check the mail every day. Of course, I never got the letter. But yeah, there were some serious paranoia issues. I don't know details of what happened. I do know that he had some trauma in his childhood, which I'm assuming did not help the situation, but I don't know the details of that.
Definitely. So, with everything that happened, how did that affect you as far as your relationships from the
Mhm.
time you were an adult to, I mean, a young adult to now before you started healing? Like, what did that look like?
My relationships were terrible, all of
Wow.
them. I could think maybe I had one healthy relationship, maybe not many. And then my first very serious boyfriend had some pretty similar tendencies to my dad, which
Oh,
should
wow.
have been a red flag, right? When we fight and he
Right.
leaves, then he calls me 700 times and he shows up in the middle of the night, banging on my doors, banging on my windows, can't get him to go away. But to me, this is what people do. So I didn't, nothing changed. So that took a long time for me to really realize what healthy relationships would look like. I at the time didn't realize how dysfunctional my relationships were. When I met my husband, I had this moment where I realized, oh, he's different. I don't know how I recognized that, but thankfully I did. And he has given me a safe space to do that healing, which is something I think I couldn't have done without him. And then it's interesting because I have a daughter who's 13. I would say when she was probably in 4th grade or so, I started seeing her friendships and how healthy they are. And
Mm.
that's when I made that connection of, oh, my relationships were not like this. I had this big fear of her going to middle school because my relationships in middle school were horrible. My best friend would scratch me if she got mad at me. She spit in my hair at school, like
Oh.
all of these things, but she was still my best friend because I didn't have any understanding of how I should have been treated or the boundaries that I should have set with people. That's probably been one of the biggest things that I've worked on.
And I like what you said there because I guess I never really thought about, what we see um, subconsciously and consciously, whether we're with our parents or not with our parents. Everything kind of spills out into our inner being and how we act. And it
Mhm.
takes a long time to realize that something's wrong before we decide to change because, like you said, relationships were similar, but we don't know better. We're like, oh, I love this person and they're giving me attention, so it's good. We don't have the ability to validate ourselves and have the self-worth to say, no, this isn't proper.
Mhm.
And I saw that in my life as well because I was married for 18 years and I lost my first marriage. I always tell everybody that, yeah, it takes two to tango, but 60% of was my anger issues, my emotional abuse issues, my yelling, my screaming, and that spilled over into my kids and everything
Mhm.
too. So when I found a new person to be with, I knew I didn't want to go down that route. And I had to like really look internally and say, man, this isn't right. What I'm doing isn't proper. I can't be yelling and screaming all the time. I have to accept that there's something wrong and do something about it. So what was your like turning point? Where did you decide like, man, this something's wrong and I need to get this fixed? And how did you start to go about that?
I realized that when I would say my daughter was probably 3 or 4, and I was still, I would say, not as reactive as I had been, like, as a teenager, where I was in people's face screaming regularly, but I still was very reactive, and I one day must have been in a heightened state and walked into my daughter's room, and it was a complete disaster, and I was already at the top of my,
Mm.
I don't know, my at the end of my rope, and I
Yeah.
lost it. And then afterwards had this moment of, this is not who I want to be. I don't want to raise my children with this mom who explodes because their room's not dirty. And that was really the turning point. I then the next day called a therapist, got scheduled, and been doing it since then.
So, besides therapy, and I've been to therapy too, and I've been on medication, and I'm still on medication for some of the major depressive disorder.
Mhm.
What other things did you find in your life that started helping you? Were you doing any journaling, any breath work, any mindset stuff, fitness? Like, what works for you currently and keeps you kind of grounded to not go back to that point?
All of the above. I am still in therapy, but therapy, of course, is a huge part of my healing, but there are so
Mm,
many things in my day-to-day that are, like, deal breakers. I have, and I have more flexibility now that I'm much more level, that I don't experience that, like, flip into fight or flight all the time. So I have more space now, but there are a couple things that are things that I can't really budge on. Sleep is one of them.
definitely.
I did not know how to sleep, and I'm not exaggerating, until maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I always thought it was just something I didn't know how to do. In therapy, I have realized that that was a trauma response. Even when I was asleep, my brain wouldn't relax. Now that I have learned how to sleep, I feel the difference throughout my day so much if I have a bad night's sleep or, don't prioritize it. So it's really something that I'm not willing to budge on. I know I can go a couple, like 2 days max, where I've gotten a couple hours less than I need to, but after that, I'm not doing it. There's really not much that's worth it to me, because if I get off cycle, it's so hard for me to get back. Again, this is something that I fought really hard to learn how to sleep. And I know it sounds weird. So sleeping is one thing that I protect very much. Journaling. I journal pretty much every day. I used to not be able to skip a day. Now I can here and there. I still prefer not to, but sometimes it's like I'm beat or I forget. Journal, but that's a huge one for me. I used to always feel like there was 700 ping pong balls bouncing around in my head different directions
Mm,
all the time. Didn't know how to stop them, didn't know how to slow it down, and I noticed a big difference in that with consistent journaling. Breath work is another big one. I'm not great at sitting still, so I do it more through, like, yoga, where I can do intentional breath work with movement. Working out, again, that's another one. That's one of my things that I protect. Not, if I miss a day, not the end of the world, but I'm not missing a week,
right.
and it can looking like different things. I can go for a bike ride. I could go for a hike. I can work out in the gym. I can do a spin class. It doesn't have to be a super specific thing, but my body needs to move in order for me to feel well.
Definitely. And guys, we're going to take a short commercial break and then we'll be right back. And we're going to get into those non-negotiables that will help you be successful. So stay tuned. We're coming right back. They told you to stay comfortable. You chose the battle. Battle Fitted is for the few who live by discipline in the gym, in the mirror, and in the mind. This isn't just fitness, it's transformation. From our coaching and mindset resources to apparel that speaks without saying a word, to keynotes that shake rooms awake, we train warriors, not followers. No fluff, no shortcuts, just real work, real change. If you're tired of talking about it, prove it. Lock in your first workout, grab your gear, book the mission at battlefittedbrand.com. And we're back, guys. And Amanda brought up some very, very good points. I love the non-negotiables. For me, fitness is definitely a non-negotiable in my life. That has severely helped me with obviously feeling better. We know if we look good, we feel good. That's very big for our mental health, but just it helps build that resilience. And I like what you said. I always tell people just because like I like to lift heavy weights doesn't mean you have to. You have to find that thing that you love and do it. And that's the thing when it comes to mindset and mental health and being aware of who you are. It's not just one thing, right? Journaling is not just journaling, just breath work, just eating healthy. You have to put everything together as a complete package to be a complete human and be happy. And for me, I always tell everybody, probably on every podcast now, that my big moment for getting out of darkness was just practicing gratitude and being thankful for what I have, and not being stuck in this constant mode of I need this new truck, I need to make money, I need to have like I really was in this rabbit hole of comparison to everybody, and it just was a very dark, scary place. So gratitude and a positive affirmations, waking up every morning. Even today, I was feeling a little off, and I'm like, it's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. It's going to be a good day. And people think it's wishy-washy and hippie and simple, but it works. The simplest things is what works. And I keep telling this. Would you like to expand on that? And then we'll get into your coaching and how you do what you do.
Yeah, so many great points that you just made there. I love how you touched on that it's multiple things. Yes, there are so many different parts to the puzzle. And something I also like to tell people is it doesn't have to be what they don't have to do what you do or what I do. They have to find what works for them. A lot of times clients will come in and say, "Well, my best friend says this has changed your life, her life." Cool. I'm glad that that worked for your best friend. That doesn't mean it's going to be what works for
Exactly.
you. So finding those things that work for specifically for you. Also agree with gratitude. That was one of my first ones as well. In my journaling every day, I do gratitudes in there. So I love that you mentioned the gratitudes. Those are such a big thing too. And yeah, really finding, just like in the gym, finding what feels good to you, finding those moments throughout your day that you can be intentional and do things that feel good to you and that nurture you. That's what it's all about.
So let's get into, you have a unique philosophy of what you call self-love snacks.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that and why the little things are what matters most.
Yeah. So, to go, I'm sure this ties back to what we were just talking about with my dad and all of that. But something that I really struggled with was my relationship with myself.
Mm.
Inside of my, not just my relationships with others, but inside my head, the way that I talked to myself, the way that I treated myself, did I ever give myself permission to do certain things? Or, if I made a mistake, oh my gosh, what is that going to be like in my head? So I started working on what I call self-love snacks. And they're these little teeny ways that I can show myself that I love myself throughout my day. And it was such a big shift for me when I realized like I'm doing things that feel good for me and I don't feel shame or guilt about taking time out of my day to do that. Because if you had asked me 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if I could ever do that, I would have laughed. Like spending time trying to nurture myself would have been hilarious. Like, no way. too
Yeah.
woo-woo for me.
And I love that because for the longest time, and I say some of this sometimes on my other podcasts as well, my wife would say to me, she would say, "I love you, but I love myself more." And
Mhm,
I would get angry, right? I'd be like, "How could you say this? You're my wife. You're supposed to love me." And I didn't understand what she meant by it until I got into personal development and trying to overcome my trauma and coaching and stuff. If you can't love yourself, how can you love anybody else? How can you be there for anybody else? How can you heal? You have to love yourself. And
mhm,
I like that you came up with the self-love snacks and finding little ways to do things. And I like to tell people all the time, with being a business owner, I have my clothing brand, I have this podcast, I have my coaching, I have my keynote speaking, I'm writing a book, and everybody's like, man, you're grinding, grinding, grinding. But I'm not. I time block all my time out, and I make
mhm,
sure that I have time to do things I love. And whether that's spending time with my family, going to the movies, taking my 13-year-old somewhere, spending time with him playing video games, or just watching a TV with the wife, or whatever I have to do. And the gym, once again, being a non-negotiable, is
mhm.
part of that. You learn that you can handle a lot more on your plate because you're not grinding your face off,
Yep.
because that way you don't have that burnout. You have to I'm a big child at heart. I love Legos. Part of my therapy is I will literally sit there, watch a movie, and put together Legos. And thank God my wife supports that. She actually bought me a Star Wars, the Star Wars sign and Legos for our anniversary a couple days ago. And I was just like, man, this is the best wife ever. She supports me being a
Yes.
big kid. So,
I love that. That's so funny because another one of my non-negotiables is alone time every week where there's nobody else in the house. It's time for me to do whatever feels like I need to do in that moment. Sometimes it's cleaning, but not usually. One of my go-tos is actually Legos. So
that's
that makes
awesome.
me very excited that you say that. I think today, Tuesdays are my day that I do my alone time. I think that's what I'm doing today is Legos, but even learning how to, when my alone time starts or, as I'm leading up to it that day, like, what do I want to do today? What feels good to me today? And being able to identify that. That's something I couldn't have done 10 years ago. But it's been a really fun journey figuring out those different things of what feels good, what doesn't. Is it something like nurturing that I need to do? Or are there some things that I've been avoiding that I need to kind of get
Mm,
fierce with myself and do? Because it's not all about doing things that you love. Of course, there are sometimes things that we have to do for ourselves that we don't necessarily want to do, but how can we incorporate all of those things? But back to your point where you said, grinding, grinding, grinding. That's not where it's at. That's leading us straight to that burnout, straight to that
mhm.
overwhelm. So how can we still, accomplish things within our businesses or in our careers if we're not business owners, but still take care of ourselves, where we still have the capacity to come home at the end of the day, not at the end of our rope, and interact with our families and you know, take time for ourselves and still feel good. We don't have to fall on the couch so overwhelmed and brain dead that we can't even function for the rest of the evening.
And I love that, and that's honestly why I do what I do now,
Mhm.
because my last career as a police officer, I would come home and I could not emotionally regulate from the stuff I saw. I come through that threshold, and either I would take it out on the wife, or I wouldn't
Mhm.
want to talk to her, or I would just sit on the couch, a lump of putty, not wanting to do anything.
Yeah.
And for me, that wasn't the right answer. And that's honestly what I'm trying to advocate for in the veteran and first responder community, to let people know that when you get home, you have to find a way to emotionally regulate and decompress before you step through that door. Because at that point, you're not a cop or a active duty military member or a veteran. You're a husband, a father, a partner. So you have to be able to like turn that stuff on and off. And for me, it was extremely hard. So two questions. One, I got to know, what are you currently building in Lego right now? And two, when you have these time by yourself, do you still find it hard to shut out like limiting beliefs or, depression or anxiety or any of that stuff? And when those little things kind of pop in your head, what do you do about it?
Two great questions. The first one, I am building a Harry Potter. It's Hagrid on the motorcycle with Harry Potter
Oh,
like in the little
awesome.
sidecar
That's
and
cool.
Hedwig on it. My son got it for me for my birthday, so that's what I'm building right now. For that alone time, Usually, no. I don't have those limiting beliefs or things like that usually now. Of course, there are times where weeks where I'm a little more anxious or a little more elevated than I normally am. And those are weeks that I use that alone time to maybe do some extra journaling or, some extra mindful breathing or whatever it feels like I need that day. But on the average week right now, I can just do whatever I want and feel good about it, which I love. There there was a time where, or I mean, I guess not even just a time. There was a huge chunk of my life where I could never have done that. Where
Mm,
even walking from my bedroom to my closet, I had to put on a podcast or music or something to distract me because I couldn't just be with me. And so
mm,
to be able to look back and see what a difference that is from going from being afraid to be in my own head to like looking forward to that week, that day every week is huge. This is just my first one, but I went on a trip by myself, just a long weekend earlier this year. And when I was on it, I did some journaling, I did some yoga, I went hiking, read for a long time. And while I was there, I was like, wow, I'm here. I didn't turn anything. I hiked in silence by myself, which before would have probably sent me into a tailspin, just all of the things going on in my head that I couldn't have gotten away from. So it's so fun to look back and see the growth. Of
and
course, it's not always perfect, right? There are
right.
days where it's hard. There are chunks where things are a lot where, slide back a little bit. That's when you really double down into those self-care practices. And that's probably a time where the snacks are not enough, but still making sure doing those snacks consistently and bigger chunks of self-care too.
And I love that. That's something, honestly, I need to practice more self-love in my life. I have
Hmm.
never in a million years thought about taking a trip by myself to get away from my wife and kids, or I don't even just go to the movies by myself. So
Yeah. And
that's
it's not
something.
even, oh, sorry.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it wasn't even about like getting away from them, but it was more about like I like me now.
Right.
So being with me, I love to spend. I definitely have FOMO if they go. I want to be with them all the time, but being at a point where it's like, oh, I like me. Let's go hang out with just me is definitely a different experience for me.
And that's something for me I definitely need to work on, because for me, I'm very time conscious, and I just feel
Hmm.
like if I'm not spending time with my family, I'm losing that benefit of
Yes.
spending time with them. But you do need time for yourself, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about your coaching and how you help women, and what that kind of looks like, from whether they book a call from you and guide us through your process, so to speak.
Yeah, so I generally they discover or schedule a discovery call and we talk about what they're looking for. There's different ways that we can go. My coaching is all client led, so I have, you know, a a program that I follow, but if I'm not going to force anything on them. It's, what's the area that you feel ready to work on? What's the most important thing for you right now? And we do a lot in self-love, in learning how to take care of ourselves, also emotional energy, like figuring out what drains you, what
Mm,
gives you energy, what sends you straight to that burnout zone, things like that. Also learning, how to identify our feelings and emotions because a lot of us have, five core emotions or even less. I'm happy, mad, sad, but they don't know how to get it more into like the intricacies and nuances and think about, why is it that every time I'm with this family member, I leave feeling this way and see if
mm,
we can dig down a little deeper into those things and use that information. And not only on a negative side, but on the side of like, okay, notice that every time I lift heavy, that I'm feeling pumped all day and using that information of let's incorporate more of those things that bring those good emotions, those positive emotions into our day too. And how can we incorporate those into our self-care and our self-love practices?
So, what are you finding? Is there a common denominator between most women, that there's one area that, I mean, and I know once again, you have to work on all areas, but is there
Mhm.
something you're finding in your clients that they're all similar with one thing they really, really need to work on? And what is that?
I would say there's two that are directly connected. It's that relationship with themselves and
Mm,
feeling worthy enough to take the time for themselves that it takes to heal and to grow so that they can stop just doing everything that everybody else says and setting those boundaries. There's that connection between having a good relationship with themselves and being able to implement those boundaries or make decisions with their well-being in mind and not putting themselves last on their list.
So would you say between men and women both, like we both relatively really struggle with just trying to love ourselves and finding the right answers to be the best version of ourselves? Because everything you told me is what men go through. So, and I really wouldn't have thought of that as,
Mm.
a man looking at the perspective of a woman or what women deal with on a daily basis.
Yeah, I haven't worked with a ton of men. I have had a handful, but I have seen very similar things. The thing that I've noticed from the men that I've worked with is there's more of that pressure to where provide financially, where
Mm.
there's more of the pressure on the women to make sure everybody's where they need to be when they're supposed to be there, make sure they're fed, they're clothed, their house is clean, all of the other things that maybe women were doing before when they weren't working, but those have been added onto their plate plus their full-time or full-time plus jobs.
Definitely. And I wish like sometimes we could break all these stigmas
Yeah.
because I definitely feel the pressure of having to or wanting to protect, provide, and preside over my wife just as I guess a man and a veteran and that leadership role. But one thing that's worked for my wife and I is we just love each other without expecting anything back. When I give
Mhm.
her everything and don't expect anything, and she gives me everything and I don't expect everything, we have a very beautiful relationship. It's not about you need to cook or you need to clean or you need to drive here. It's just how can I help you? And I think for me in my marriage, my always like, oh my God, like this, like I honestly care and I love her and I adore her because I don't care what I can get out of it. Now, of course, I want to be loved and I
Yeah.
want to have the emotional and physical love that my wife gives me, but I'm more apt to get it just by giving that and not thinking about what am I receiving. And I think a lot of relationships they need to work on that. And even that's what I try to advise people if they ask about marriage relationships and stuff. I'm not a relationship expert, but I've known from my own marriage that being more giving than expecting is a world of good. Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I'm not a relationship expert either, but I I would like to say my relationship is very healthy and we do very similar to like what you were saying. And then also knowing some weeks my husband's got more on his plate and some weeks I have more on my plate. So how can we help each other and support each other in those times? We don't have our like these are the things you do and these are the things I do and set in stone. Of course, there are things that my husband's better at doing like grocery shopping. I'm the worst grocery shopper in the world. So those are things that he more commonly does than I do, but there's that give and take and having that open communication, letting him know, I actually had a night the other day where my son scared me when I was asleep and then the rest of the night I felt like I was in fight or flight all night.
Oh
So when my
wow.
husband woke up, I told him just to give you a heads up, this is what happened and I feel this way so that he's not walking in like unaware that I'm probably need to take some extra time for myself to get back to a normal state. So having that open communication, giving love freely and not expecting things in return. Of course, like you said, receiving is so great also, but not that like tit for tat. Well, I did this for you. Are you going to do something for me now? But just really looking out for the best interests of each other and for our family. And then I know you mentioned you had a 13-year-old, as do I. I think it's also very important that we're prioritizing our relationships. Kids can take over everything, but it's so important to me that my husband and I are still making time to connect, just us, which in the summertime is a whole different thing that it is
Right.
during the school year. But I want, and it's, of course, a benefit for us, but I also think it's important for our kids to see when they grow up. First, like we were talking about, it's important for them to be able to take time for themselves, to be able to recognize when they need something and feel comfortable asking for that time, but also to feel comfortable making time for their relationships. Because if our relationship falls apart, then everything does.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one thing that I always speak on a lot, especially as a father. My daughter is 25. My middle son is going to be 24. And then I have the 13-year-old.
Mhm.
And it really took a lot of me looking at myself. And like I said, with that first marriage, who all my kids are uh, born from my ex-wife, I really had to look deep inside with the anger and stuff. And a funny story is, it's been probably maybe 4 months now. I text my kids and I was really like feeling like, man, I want to see the older two a lot more. You know, as adults, they get in their own way, their own life, and they start to kind of, back away from their parents. And I texted both of them like, "Hey guys, I just want to let you know I love you guys, but I'd like to see you at least once a month, whether it's for dinner or doing something." And my daughter goes, "Dad, are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. It's just I love you, and I appreciate spending time with you. And once again, knowing that time is short, I want you to know that you have a father that loves you, adores you, and will always be there for you." And that's something I had to learn by myself, because my father, and I like when you were talking about relationships. I see my father after my mom died in 2018. I moved him down to me so I could take care of him. But my dad's a hard man, and he's the kind of guy that if I come to him for advice and I'm like, "Dad, what do you think about this?" He doesn't give me advice. He just turns it into something being bad about himself.
Mm,
And I had to learn to guard myself from that, and
mhm.
kind of, I see my father. I do love my father. I'll take him to his doctor's appointments or help him however he needs, but I kind of keep an arm's length with it from him or with him, because I have to protect my mental health and stuff.
Yep.
So I had to change that mindset when it came to taking care of my kids and being hands-on, and even being a co-parent with my ex-wife. It took me a lot of time to get out of that being angry that the marriage was over, and taking things out on her that maybe she didn't understand or wasn't necessarily her fault. And while we don't have like this amazing fairy tale relationship, we have a good relationship. She can talk to my wife without issues. I went to my house, my ex-wife's house, this last weekend, to return him, but to help him fix his room. He needed a new
Mm,
bed put together. He needs his walls painted. And the old Rob would have been like, "I ain't doing this. Like, this is your house. You do it." And realized that to benefit my kids, I have to be selfless in a lot of things I do. And it's helped a lot. It's been amazing. My kids are amazing. I'm very proud of my 13-year-old son. He's doing really good in band and school and everything. And I think that's, part of a product of my parenting, and how I treat him and act towards his mom and my current wife. So like you said, they have to see that relationship. And as parents, if you're not present in the kids' lives, they're going to have issues. And as
yep.
parents, if you are present in their life, but you're yelling and screaming and taking out abuse on them, they're going to have issues. So
Absolutely.
you
That's
have
where
to,
they learn how to love.
right, right. You have to choose to love and lead with love. And as a man, it doesn't make you a weakling or anything bad to just love on your kids and say, "I love you," and tuck them in and put on the tutu if your daughter wants to play princess or whatever. That's what a man is. That shows them that a man, when she grows up and she searches for that man, she's going to search for someone that's like you. And do you want
Mhm.
him to search for an abuser or for someone that loves and has kindness and emotional stability? So before I ask you the last question of the show, where can they find you or link up with you if they want to get in contact with you and learn more about your services?
The best place to find me is my website, which is simplywellnesscoach.com, and then my links to everything else are there. I also have a weekly newsletter that I send out that's short, sweet, actionable. That's usually the best place to go.
Awesome. And guys, when this airs on the YouTube, everything will be linked in the description so you can connect with Amanda. Amanda, the last question I always ask my guests before I close the show: what is your definition of turning pain into progress?
My definition of turning pain into progress is not ignoring the pain or hiding from it. I think there's a lot of time in my life where I just tried to pretend like it wasn't there, like that wasn't happening, like I didn't have these problems. But facing those problems and doing the work that we need to do to overcome them, it's not easy. One of actually, I think it's the hardest thing that I've ever done is this journey to heal and to grow, but it is so incredibly worth it. And we
Definitely.
all deserve that.
Definitely. And so, guys, my final thoughts is this. We just heard that basically from Amanda. It seems like men and women, we all deal with the same issues, the same struggles. We go through emotional turmoil. Somehow in our life, we all have some sort of trauma. And it's not for us to decide if my trauma is worse than Amanda's or Amanda's trauma is worse than mine. It's our jobs to heal from the inside out, not the outside in, and really take a deep look at ourselves of who we are and who we want to become. Realize that you're not alone in this journey. We all struggle. We all have emotional problems. We all deal with relationship issues, budget issues, finance issues. Nobody's perfect. But when you can take that time to go into that darkness, you realize that going into that darkness wasn't as bad as we originally thought, and you can heal, and you can heal quicker. If you need help, whether you're a man or a woman, uh, hit up Amanda if you resonated with her. Hit up me if you resonated with me. We're just here to help and heal the world. And guys, as I like to say, always be fit for battle. Amanda, thank you for joining me today on the Battle Harder podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've just heard another battle-tested conversation. Now it's time to take action. If this episode lit a fire in you, subscribe on Spotify, Apple, iHeart, or YouTube, so you never miss a moment that could change your life. Want to go deeper? Connect with Coach Rob at Battlefitted Brand. For coaching, gear, and tools to help you turn your pain into progress. Remember, life will test you, but you're built to battle harder. Until next time, stay locked in, stay ready, and keep showing up.